So I was playing some GTA 5 the other day, just to relax for a bit. And I was playing for about an hour, and in that hour, I would say I blew up dozens of helicopters, hundreds of cars, killed thousands of people, many of them police officers. And while that was happening, I was thinking to myself, how is the city able to sustain this level of damage? Now, Los Santos obviously seems to have an unlimited supply of helicopters, of police officers, of guns, of ammo. But what about the real world? What about the real Los Angeles? What would be the true cost of a GTA massacre in real life? Now, the first thing I have to say about this is that games do not cause violence. They do not. They don't. No matter what Joe Biden thinks, no matter what your grandma thinks, games do not cause violence. Now, there have been dozens of studies over the last decade that have pretty much totally proved games do not cause violence. They do not. So even though this topic is going to seem like it's quite dark, it is quite sinister, I'm literally talking about people dying, people being murdered. They are ones and zeros. It is a game. It is not real life. This is a video for fun, it is educational, it is interesting, and what I am doing is merely taking an event from a game, putting it into a real-world context, and then thinking about what some of those things might be. So I'm going to take all of the costs associated with an event like this in the real world, and I'm going to break them down. So there are three categories of cost that we're going to focus on, and the first one is the material cost. This is the pure dollar signs, the financial side. How much does a police helicopter cost in Los Santos, in Los Angeles, and if you shoot it down, how much is that going to cost the city? So the pure nuts and bolts financial side. And then we've got the human cost. Now, there have been a bunch of studies over the last few years that have actually tried to put a dollar value on the human life. Now, one of these is the US insurance model, which says how much is an insurance company willing to pay for your life, and that's like $50,000 to $129,000. Then you've got other ones that talk about if you were selling the elements in your body, the potassium, the iron, your water, how much money would you get for stuff like that? Now, I think those are stupid, and I'm not going to use them in this study at all. Instead, I've taken something else, a different look, and I'm going to talk about that when we get there. And then we've got the political cost. Now, Los Santos is a crazy place. There are literally hundreds of people dying every single day. There are gang battles where thousands lie dead, hundreds of police officers. It is a crazy exaggeration of life in Los Angeles, used for comedic effect. But unfortunately, things that we're going to be talking about in this video have actually happened in real life. And so I'm going to take some of the news about those, how those things impacted our world, and how if we took this event from Grand Theft Auto, how that would affect us too. So I'm showing on the screen now the massacre that we're going to be talking about. I opened the game for like 10 minutes, started shooting, and this was the very first massacre that I did. Now, we don't have 3 minutes to just sit here and watch me play, so I've sped this version up, but if you would like to see the full unaltered version, so you can count along, see how many people I actually killed, actually blew up, then you can go into the description below and find the unaltered version there. And I think that was the fairest way to do it. And also, once you start learning the numbers and the costs associated with an event like this, it makes it all the more crazy when just a random massacre that you probably have done 100 times in a short play session, how truly impactful something like that would be in the real world. So, as a sad result of my 10 minutes in Grand Theft Auto, well, 23 civilians died, 31 police officers died, there were 4 police cars destroyed, 2 police SUVs destroyed, 3 civilian cars destroyed, and 3 helicopters shot out of the sky. So let's find out, what is the true cost of a GTA massacre in real life? Now, the police cars in GTA 5 are based on the common US police car, the Ford Police Interceptor sedan. Now, according to the pricing sheet released by the police in Ohio, they cost $22,977 per car. Times 4, that would be $91,908 for the police cars. Now, the SUVs are based on the SUV version of the Ford Police Interceptor, and they cost $25,000 per car. And we destroyed 2 of them. which is $50,000. However, to turn a normal car into a police car requires a host of other equipment as well. Radio, interface wiring, first aid, the gun rack, and that is listed in that same pricing sheet as costing $5,000 per car. That adds another $30,000 in total. Then the 3 civilian cars totaled up to $69,000. So in terms of just destroyed cars, we have $240,908. Now, there were quite a few explosions in our run, and many officers were killed by them. So what that means is that all of the equipment they would have been wearing is totally wrecked and cannot be reused. So I counted 19 officers whose equipment would have been destroyed. Now, every officer has their weapon, their uniform, their accessories, and their police radio. Now, the LAPD lists the cost of those altogether as $7,920 in total. Since 19 were destroyed by explosions, that equates to a total of $150,480. Then when we include all of the ammunition in total from all of the police officers firing, that added an extra $500. Then we've got our 3 helicopters. The police helicopters in GTA are based on the Eurocopter AS-350 Equerel, a French helicopter that's used by the LAPD. Now, we destroyed 3 of them. Each of those costs $2.4 million to purchase, and then an additional $75,000 to outfit with the necessary police equipment. Totaling all that together, that is $7,425,000 worth of damage in helicopters alone. So when you take that, our helicopters, our police equipment, and our cars all together, that brings the total to $7,816,888 in material cost from 3 minutes of running around in GTA. And now for the human cost. Now, first things first, you really cannot put a dollar value on human life. People have tried, and I've gone over their studies and their numbers and their theories, but none of them really work for what I'm talking about in this breakdown. You can't put a value on human life. You just can't. But can you put a cost on human death? Again, that might seem like an incalculable number, there are just too many factors. But in an Iowa State University study called Murder by the Numbers, Monetary Costs Imposed by a Sample of Homicide Offenders, we're actually able to get a realistic idea of the actual cost of the violent loss of human life. Now, what that study does is it identifies all of the factors of cost in a murder and then calculates them all together. Now, through this study and the factors they look at, we're actually able to get a realistic understanding at the genuine monetary loss that would be inflicted on a community, on individuals, on the government, by the violent loss of human life. Now, some of those factors they include are like the cost of a funeral. Now, in Los Angeles, that is on average $6,500 to $20,000. Then there's the cleanup costs, which is on average $2,500 in California. Then you've got things like the fact that when someone is murdered in an area, property values go down, insurance costs go up, and then according to a study by the IZA Institute of Labor Economics, the consequences of mass murder impact everything from local manufacturing to tourism to even an increase in small businesses going bankrupt in the area. Then when you think about the emotional toll of a murder, there's the cost of therapy for their friends, their family, even for the people they work with. Then we look at the justice cost. Every murder has an investigation, and there are detectives that need to be paid, forensic staff who need to be paid, and with a mass shooting, that number is multiplied many times over. Now, in our 3 minutes of GTA, the perpetrator died at the end, so there are no trial costs, but there would still be a huge investigation. How did something like this happen? Who was the person, and what fault, if any, lies with the police department? Then they take all of these factors together and add them up. And so according to our Iowa State University study, we arrive at the cost for a single murder at $17,252,656. Now, in our 3 minutes of Grand Theft Auto, we killed 54 people. That would equate to $931,643,424 in human cost. Almost $1 billion in monetary loss for individuals, for the community, for the local government. Now, remember, these are only the numbers that we can record through factors that we understand. Funeral cost, health cost, therapy cost. There is no real way to record the actual level of cost that would come from something like this. You can't put a dollar value on life lost, and you can't put a dollar value on the lives of people who have to live after. Those are things that we just can't really understand. Now, luckily, these are just ones and zeros in a game. They're not real. This was not a real event. But sadly, things like this have happened in real life, and so we can take a look at those things, at those events, and then see how they've shaped and impacted the world. And through that, we can understand the political cost of our 3 minutes of Grand Theft Auto 5. Now, the LAPD is one of the largest police forces in the world. They've got 9,000 sworn-in officers, almost 3,000 civilian staff, a budget over $1 billion, and more vehicles and munitions than most small nations. And in our 3 minutes of GTA, we blew up 3 helicopters, destroyed 6 cars, killed 31 officers. Now, considering the LAPD has more than 6,000 vehicles in its fleet, I don't think the car loss is going to be a huge issue for them. However, they don't have as many helicopters. In fact, the LAPD air fleet only has 19 helicopters, though that number isn't as small as you think, considering the fact that the New Zealand military only has 15. Now, of those 19 LAPD aircraft, 10 of those are Eurocopters, the type of helicopter used for patrol and the type we blew up. So in our 3 minutes, we destroyed almost 1/3 of the LAPD helicopter patrol fleet. So think about that next time you're shooting LSPD helicopters out of the sky. Now, with their billion-dollar budget, they should be able to afford replacing them, but considering no LAPD helicopter has been shot down in their entire history, you can imagine the level of investigation there would be into an event like this. It's impossible to imagine what would be the real-life response to an event of this scale. However, in April of 1970, 4 members of the California Highway Patrol were shot and killed in what is now called the New Hall Incident. During a routine traffic stop, heavily armed criminals murdered the 4 officers. This was the deadliest day in the history of California law enforcement. In our 3 minutes, we killed 31 officers. That is an order of magnitude worse, an event the likes of which has never been seen in the history of law enforcement in the United States. After New Hall, California police departments went through major overhaul. They realized their training was lacking and their preparedness for a situation they never anticipated was lacking too. This event led to the standardization of firearms and firearm training for officers, the wearing of bulletproof vests for officers, and this is considered one of the key starting points for the militarization of the police in the United States. Police militarization led to the introduction of military tactics and equipment like armored personnel carriers, grenade launchers, flashbangs, more. 4 officers being murdered in 1970 led to a transformation of police equipment and operation that has continued to grow more militarized even until today. Now, you can imagine that 31 officers being shot dead would lead to similar changes, but on a more dramatic scale, the likes of which we have never seen before.
This is an extremely traumatic experience, and we've seen over and over again situations like this where people are traumatized and sometimes people are injured and killed.
In April of 1996, in the Tasmanian heritage town of Port Arthur, Australia endured its own mass shooting, the worst in its history. 35 people were murdered and dozens more were injured in an attack that was felt by every single Australian. 12 days later, the National Firearms Agreement was passed. The law created a National Firearms Registry. It added a 28-day waiting period for purchasing a firearm, and it tightened the licensing for firearms. It now meant that if you wanted to buy a gun, you had to provide a genuine reason for wanting one. The police now know who owns guns, why they have them, and how many. The agreement also established a buyback of firearms, since now many guns that people owned were now illegal. The government agreed to buy those guns from their owners at a total cost of $230 million. They bought 600,000 guns. This was an unprecedented introduction of gun control to a country that loved hunting, loved guns, and had almost no gun laws beforehand. Port Arthur, a single event, changed Australia forever. Its culture of guns changed. Now, they still exist, but the idea of everyone and their mother having a gun just for the sake of it doesn't exist anymore. But our 3 minutes of GTA didn't happen in Australia. It happened in Los Santos, and Los Santos is in the US. And so the political question is very different. In Australia, one mass shooting led to total gun control and firearm buybacks. In 2019, in New Zealand, one mass shooting led to gun control and firearm buybacks. In 2019, in the United States, there were 435 mass shootings. That is more than one a day, with almost 517 people being killed and more than 1,643 injured. In fact, since 2013, there have been over 2,128 mass shootings in the United States. That's unbelievable. So when I talk about the political cost of our 3 minutes in GTA, which would be the second worst mass shooting in the US history, it's hard to really say if there would be any. If 58 people being murdered and 851 injured in a shooting in 2017 didn't have a political impact at all, If the killing of 27 people in an elementary school in Sandy Hook in 2012 didn't have a political impact in the US, if the killing of kindergartners didn't change anything, then our 3 minutes in GTA won't either. I want to thank you guys so much for listening to this, and if you found this very weird, very dark topic as interesting as I did, it would be great if you subscribed and dropped a like below, because I'm going to make quite a few more of these, because it's really interesting delving into some of the realistic impact of some of the things we see in games, movies, and books. So thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you next time.